He stands at 70 years old with the kind of silence that frightens even the strongest hearts. A man once praised as the guardian of American cinema now carries an invisible weight heavier than any badge, any crown, any legend he ever wore on screen. People still remember him as the dreamer who built a baseball field in a cornfield, the sheriff who never blinked, the bodyguard who walked through the rain with a woman the world adored. But behind that familiar face is a storm no camera ever caught. A storm made of broken vows, empty rooms, children growing up between houses, and the cruel truth that even icons cannot outrun the cost of their own choices. This is the chapter he never wanted the world to read. The quiet collapse after decades of holding everyone else together. The nights spent alone on the ranch he once filled with laughter. The betrayal that arrived like a knife disguised as a friend. The dream he risked everything, for only to watch it bleed money faster than he could save it. And the body, once iron strong, now paying for every fall, every stunt, every sleepless year, he spent chasing perfection. Yet something in him refuses to break, something stubborn and sacred. Because the tragedy of Kevin Costner is not how much he lost, it is how fiercely he still fights to stand. He did not begin life with spotlight or applause. He began it in a small, rented house that smelled of metal soap and quiet worry. Kevin Michael Costner was born in Linwood, California, the son of a man who dug ditches with cracked hands and a mother who carried the burdens of strangers home in her tired eyes. Their love was simple, their life was fragile, and every month was a negotiation with survival. But the shadow hanging over that family was older than Kevin himself. 2 years before he was born, a baby named Mark Douglas came into the world and left it in a single day. His parents never spoke about it. The grief simply settled in the walls like cold air. His father became stricter, guarding his remaining sons with a fear that had no name. His mother grew quieter, often pausing in the kitchen as if listening for a child who might still be there. Kevin learned early that silence can be louder than tears. By the time he turned 12, he had moved more times than he could count. Compton, Ventura, Visalia, Orange County. Each address was a temporary promise. Each goodbye carved another small wound. He was not the bold one, not the athlete, not the kid who took up space. He was the quiet boy in the back row writing poems no one ever read. A boy who knew how to leave before he ever learned how to belong. Still, something inside him refused to fade. In church choirs, his voice trembled but carried hope. At night, he filled notebooks with dreams of wide-open land, of stories bigger than the towns that kept pushing him out. His father's discipline hardened him. His mother's patience softened him. And the loss he never witnessed shaped him more than any victory ever would. Every moving truck, every empty room, every new beginning stitched a kind of strength into him. A belief that even if the world did not see him, he could still build something that would last. He would later say, "I guess I was used to starting over." But that was never about geography. It was about survival. It was the quiet truth that carried him toward a destiny no one in that little house could have imagined. At 23 years old, fresh out of college, with a degree he never truly wanted, he stood at the edge of adulthood, already carrying a quiet exhaustion. He had a new wife, a steady job, and a life that looked safe from the outside. Each morning he buttoned his shirt, smiled at the mirror, and walked into an office where the air felt too still, too small, too far from the pulse he felt inside his chest. The world called it responsibility. He called it suffocation. Then destiny appeared in the most ordinary place imaginable, an airplane seat. On his flight home from a modest honeymoon in Mexico, he glanced to his right and saw Richard Burton, one of the greatest actors of his era, sitting close enough to touch. The moment felt unreal, like a door had opened, where a wall had always been. Kevin gathered his courage and confessed something he had never admitted out loud. He wanted to act, but he was afraid. Burton studied him with eyes shaped by 1,000 roles and said, "You have green eyes. I have green eyes. I think you will be fine." When the plane landed, Burton stepped into a limousine and Kevin stepped toward a crowded bus stop. Before the door closed, Burton leaned out and whispered, "Good luck." Two simple words that detonated inside him. Within weeks, Kevin Costner quit his job and walked into a life with no map, no savings, no applause, only a stubborn fire that refused to die. What followed was not romance. It was survival. He scrubbed boats. He drove delivery trucks. He guided tourists past mansions he could not afford to dream about. Some nights he slept in a cold apartment wrapped in jackets because the heating had failed again. Pride kept him from calling home. Hunger taught him how much a dream truly costs. He carried headshots in a worn folder that grew soft with sweat. Casting agents barely looked up when he entered the room. "Leave your photo," they would say, already reaching for the next name. He walked miles to save bus fare, feet aching, stomach tight with hunger. At night, he sat in a car outside studio gates, watching extras walk out, laughing under bright lights, while he sat in the dark, unseen. His first film, Sizzle Beach, USA, was so cheap and embarrassing that he later admitted he wished he could burn every copy. He landed a role in The Big Chill, only to have every scene cut. He went to the premiere alone, staring at a screen where he did not exist. 6 years passed that way. 6 years of showing up, disappearing, and showing up again. But silence has a way of shaping those who dare to stay. He trained in acting classrooms late into the night, studying how to turn pain into truth. He learned resilience the hard way, the way only the overlooked ever learn it. Then, in 1985, the world finally turned toward him. Director Lawrence Kasdan, the same man who once cut him from a film, called him for a role in Silverado. When the camera rolled, Kevin did not act. He erupted. Everything he had endured, every cold night, every slammed door, every humiliation burned across the screen. Audiences felt it. Hollywood felt it. And suddenly, the man no one noticed became the man no one could ignore. From that moment on, his name did not pass by. It stayed. It lingered. It mattered. The rise was swift, but it was not accidental. It was the natural explosion of a man who had been silent for too long. After Silverado, he stepped into The Untouchables, a film that crowned him as the embodiment of quiet American courage. Audiences felt something different in him, something steady and sincere, as if he carried the moral weight of the story in his bones. The movie crossed $100 million, but what it gave him mattered far more than money. It gave him respect. Then came Bull Durham and Field of Dreams, two films that carved his name into the soul of American cinema. In that moonlit cornfield, when he whispered, "If you build it, he will come," it felt like he was speaking to every lost dreamer who had ever held on to hope. It was not just a line, it was a promise. By 1990, he no longer wanted to only act. He wanted to create. He mortgaged his own money, formed his own production company, and set out to make a film Hollywood openly mocked. Dances with Wolves was called madness. Too long, too ambitious, too quiet. A Western spoken in Lakota. A director with little experience. A guaranteed failure, they said, but he knew the truth inside silence better than anyone. He understood stories that did not need to shout. He believed in the dignity of a people history had ignored, and he believed in the power of stillness on screen. So he pressed on through storms that tore down sets, budgets that exploded, and nights so cold he wondered if he had traded his entire life for a beautiful mistake. The result stunned the world. The film earned more than $400 million and swept the Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. In a single night, the boy who once wrote poems in the back of classrooms became one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. But power is its own storm. Fame does not pause, success does not sleep, and pressure, once it settles, begins to erode the very ground it rests upon. His next hits were massive, but behind the scenes he was already cracking. He smiled on red carpets while exhaustion hollowed him out. He fought for creative freedom while the industry demanded more, faster, bigger. And when the failures finally arrived, they arrived like a flood. Waterworld nearly drowned him, both literally and figuratively. Hurricanes destroyed sets, costs spiraled out of control. The press mocked him endlessly. The postman followed, sinking deeper, dragging his reputation with it. The same hands that once held Oscars now held unpaid bills. The same voice that once commanded studios now echoed in rooms that felt too big, too empty. Success had taken him to the top of the world. Failure reminded him how far a man can fall. Long before the fame, before the awards, before Hollywood asked for every piece of his soul, there was a young woman who believed in him with a purity the world rarely sees. Her name was Cindy Silva. She met him when he was a shy 20-year-old at California State University, Fullerton. A boy who spoke softly, dreamed loudly, and feared he might never be enough. She was bright, warm, and full of the kind of faith that makes impossible things feel close. She once told a friend, "He looks like he is chasing something only he can see," and she loved him for that. In 1978, they married with nothing but hope and borrowed furniture. Their first apartment smelled of paint and cheap pasta dinners, and every night they sat on the floor, imagining a future they had no roadmap to reach. She worked double shifts. He drove across Los Angeles, battling rejection after rejection, returning home with pockets empty, but heart still burning. Each night she told him the same sentence, a sentence that kept him alive: do not quit. When Annie was born in 1984, then Lily in 1986, and Joe in 1988, he wept each time, promising he would build a world worthy of the daughters and son he held in trembling arms. For a while, he did. They had picnics under the California sun, bedtime stories whispered in warm rooms, a growing family stitched together by sacrifice and simple joy. Then fame arrived not as a blessing, but as a tide. The Untouchables' Field of Dreams, Dances with Wolves. Each success lifted his name higher and pushed him farther from home. The man who once knew every detail of his children's days now lived out of suitcases, flying between film sets and hotels, returning home exhausted, distracted, consumed by a life too large for the gentle family he once built. Cindy waded through forgotten anniversaries, lonely nights, missed school events, and rumors that stung even when unproven. Every magazine headline became another quiet wound. She was raising 3 children while reading about her husband in worlds she never asked to enter. He stood under Oscar lights, while she sat at home with dishes in the sink and the soft hum of a baby monitor nearby. Trust rarely shatters in one moment. It erodes slowly, like dusk swallowing daylight. They tried counseling. They took breaks from work. They escaped to cabins, hoping the quiet could save them. But distance had already rooted itself between them. In 1994, after 16 years of trying to hold the center together, they filed for divorce. The courts called it one of Hollywood's costliest splits, $80 million. No prenuptial agreement, but the price they paid could not be measured in money. It was the sight of their children packing bags for 2 homes. It was the empty chair at the dinner table. It was the sound of laughter fading from the place they once called forever. Kevin later said with a voice that faltered, "You are going to see the people you love most only half as much, and that single sentence carried more heartbreak than any headline ever written. After the divorce, fame did not comfort him. Awards did not hold him. Crowds did not warm the cold space in his chest. He worked endlessly, traveled constantly, smiled for cameras, as if nothing inside him had broken. But when the lights went out, he went home to quiet rooms, and the echo of children's voices now living halfway between two worlds. He was learning how to be alone again, but it was a painful education. Then, unexpectedly, a soft voice entered that silence. Her name was Bridget Rooney. She carried grace without arrogance, intelligence without sharp edges, and a calm steadiness he had not felt in years. An heiress from a powerful family, yet disarmingly kind. They met at a charity event in Aspen, where champagne shimmered in candlelight and snow fell like soft music outside. She asked him gently, "Do you still believe in happiness?" He answered with a half-smile, "I still believe. I just do not know if I deserve it." Their connection did not burn with the wild intensity of youth. It was gentler, smaller, two wounded people, meeting in the quiet space between past and future. And from that brief window came something permanent. A son, Liam Timothy Costner, born in 1996. When news surfaced, the world leaned in with its usual hunger for scandal. But Kevin met the moment with honesty. There was uncertainty at first, and he agreed to a DNA test. When it confirmed what both hearts already knew, he accepted responsibility immediately. He set up a trust fund. He provided support without hesitation. He promised himself this child would never feel the absence he once felt in his own home. Their romance did not last long. By 1998, the relationship ended, but there were no headlines soaked in bitterness, no courtroom battles, no accusations. Just two people parting with dignity, bonded forever by one boy they both cherished. Bridget later married a businessman. Kevin kept his word. He visited Liam, celebrated milestones, and ensured the boy grew up shielded from the spotlight that had scarred so many Hollywood children. "I have made enough noise for 2 lifetimes," he once said softly. It is better for him to live in peace. This chapter was not scandal. It was a small redemption, a reminder that responsibility, when embraced, can become its own kind of grace. He truly believed the storm had passed. After years of rebuilding himself, raising his children with steadiness, working through failure, and rebuilding his name with quiet dignity, Kevin Costner felt he had finally stepped into the kind of peace most men spend their whole lives chasing. And that peace had a name: Christine Baumgartner. They met in 1998, but life was not ready for them yet. She was 20 years younger, graceful, confident, a model and handbag designer with a calm warmth that balanced the restless ambition that had driven him for decades. He wanted safety. She wanted a family. He hesitated. She walked away. By 2002, they drifted apart. Not because they stopped loving each other, but because they feared wanting different futures. But destiny has a stubborn way of circling back. When she returned, Kevin realized something with startling clarity. I cannot lose her, over fear. 2 years later, on a bright September day in 2004, at his beloved Dunbar Ranch in Aspen, they married under a sky so blue it felt like it belonged to a storybook. Christine arrived in a horse-drawn carriage, radiant, trembling with joy. Kevin waited beneath soft mountain light, whispering to a friend, I did not think I would get this chance again. For nearly 2 decades, they built a world that looked like heaven. Their home in Santa Barbara echoed with the laughter of 3 children: Caden in 2007, Hayes in 2009, and Grace in 2010. Winters in Colorado were filled with snow forts and steaming cocoa. Summers on the California coast were spent barefoot on warm sand. Movie nights, birthdays, whispered bedtime stories told by a voice the whole world recognized. For the first time in years, Kevin felt grounded. He felt chosen. He felt home. "This," he once said, looking at Christine across a dinner table, "is what I was running toward all along." But paradise does not always explode. Sometimes it erodes. As the 2020 seconds began, his career roared back with a force he never expected. Yellowstone became the most watched drama on cable television. His schedule grew tighter, his days longer. Then came Horizon, the massive Western he had dreamed of making since 1988. A film so large, he invested $38 million of his own money to keep it alive. The project consumed him. Months of filming, endless travel, sleepless nights. It was his legacy, his final mountain. But that mountain cast a long shadow over the home he loved. Christine found herself raising 3 children almost alone. The house felt too big on the nights he did not come home. "I miss the simple things," she told a friend. Coffee in the morning, breakfast together, a day with no schedule. She wanted presence. He offered provision. In the space between those two needs, a quiet sadness grew. Then came May, 2023. He was on set when someone approached him with papers that would carve a scar into the rest of his life. Christine had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Those on set said he froze script pages, trembling in his hands, as he stared at the signature that ended 19 years of belief. Later he whispered, "It felt like the ground came out from under me." What followed was not calm or dignified. It was a wildfire. Legal filings, headlines, accusations, requests for $248,000 a month in child support, court reductions to $63,000, a prenuptial agreement enforced with cold precision. She was ordered to leave the Santa Barbara home, the house where their children had taken their first steps. Neighbors said the day she left, the curtains moved like wings. Kevin returned that evening to rooms still scented with her perfume and the sea. "Silence," he said, "has a scent." Then came the photographs. Christine walking on the coast beside a man he once called a friend, Josh Connor. Nothing proven. Everything broken. "I still love her," Kevin confided quietly. "But some things you cannot unsee." And so he found himself dividing another life he had tried so hard to build. This time, it was not just money. It was bedtime routines, weekend schedules, school events split between parents. 3 young hearts, now learning the painful math of separation. By early 2024, the court finalized the end. The prenuptial agreement held. The law spoke, but the ache did not fade. The first time he told a confidant, "I lost half my wealth. This time, I lost half my heart." He kept filming, he kept directing, he kept going, because the world expected him to. But behind every camera, in every quiet trailer, lived a man grieving a family he tried desperately to keep whole. Và đó mới chỉ là sự khởi đầu của những gì ông phải đối mặt ở tuổi 70. There comes a moment in every life when the body begins to speak a language the spirit refuses to understand. At 70 years old, Kevin Costner is still the man who rides horses, directs films in brutal heat, climbs hills at dawn, and works with a fire that burns far younger than his age. But his body, faithful for decades now, whispers a truth he cannot ignore. The price of every fall, every stunt, every sleepless night has come due. Waterworld scorched his skin and nearly took his life when he was tied to a mast during a sudden storm. Open Range left him with a cracked rib after a horse threw him into the dirt. Hidden Figures, though quieter on screen, was filmed while he endured the sharp, relentless agony of kidney stones. He pushed through with medication, never missing a single day on set. Maybe the anger in that scene came from a real place, he admitted later. Today, the echoes of those battles live in his bones. His knees lock in the cold, his back stiffens in the mornings, his shoulders ache when the aspen wind cuts too sharply. Doctors call it normal. He calls it proof. Proof that he has lived fully, fiercely, relentlessly. Yet, he still wakes before dawn, still feeds the horses at Dunbar Ranch, watching steam rise from their breath as the first light paints the mountains gold, still walks the same trails he once walked with his children when they were small enough to ride on his shoulders. The past lives in every footprint. Crew members who work with him on Horizon say he works harder than men half his age. He directs, acts, edits, negotiates, and carries the weight of a film that nearly broke him financially. During breaks, he sits quietly, eyes fixed on the horizon, stretching across the desert like a promise he refuses to abandon. "You cannot fake the truth in a man's eyes," he once told a young actor. His own eyes still burn with that truth, tired but unbroken. But age has brought not only pain, it has brought perspective. He owns empires now, land he once dreamed about as a boy, moving from town to town. His Dunbar Ranch in Aspen is 160 acres of mountain solitude, worth nearly $250 million. Timber lodges a lake house, a river house, a private baseball field, skating rink trails carved through whispering forests. At night, winter snow reflects the glow of fireplaces and turns the valley gold. In Santa Barbara, his Flint Ridge estate sits above the ocean like a Tuscan memory. Terracotta, arches lavender gardens, Italian fresco ceilings, wine cellars with 1,000 bottles, each one a year he survived. From those terraces he watches the Pacific burn orange at dusk, the same view he once shared with Christine and the children before the world went quiet. Despite the wealth, he moves through his days with the same humility he learned as a boy. He donates millions to causes close to his heart: Parkinson's research, children's hospitals, shelters for women, relief funds for first responders. "Money is not success," he says. "It is a tool. Tools are meant to build something." And the greatest thing he has ever built is not a film or a fortune. It is his 7 children: Annie Lily Joe, Liam, Caden Hayes Grace. 7 lives shaped by his presence, his mistakes, his love, his learning. 7 echoes of the boy who once whispered dreams into cheap notebooks under dim lights. But perhaps the deepest wound he carries even now is the memory of Whitney Houston. Her death in 2012 shattered something that never fully healed. He spoke at her funeral in a trembling voice, telling the world she was greater than she ever believed. When he whispered, "I will always love you," the choir stopped, the world froze, and he gave her the farewell she deserved. In recent years, when her song comes on the radio, friends say he sometimes reaches to turn the dial, not out of avoidance, out of reverence, like stepping quietly out of a room where someone you loved is still sleeping. At 70, his body has slowed, but his purpose has not. He directs Horizon not for fame, but for closure, for legacy, for the story he promised himself he would finish long before he knew how much life could break a man. And through every ache, every loss, every betrayal, he still stands. Proof that endurance is a kind of grace. Proof that even when the body bends, the spirit can remain unshaken.